Bombay. And of course, he and I happen to be batchmates because he's also class of 85. Ravi has just taken over as chairman of Bank of Baroda, which is, I think, part of the very exciting changes that we are putting in place. So number one, it's just governance. Number two is operating autonomy. And again, in I think a very, very landmark order that the Honorable Prime Minister put out, which is to say that going forward, we will not allow any political interference in our banks. So whether it is on appointments or whether it is on loans, we have made it absolutely clear there will be no instructions on the political side in terms of what the banks have to do. They have to operate as per their commercial logic. This, by the way, those of you who know the public sector banks, was just a landmark decision, and we made it very clear, and I think all the banks will tell you that there are no calls coming in from North Block any longer. So we've set them free in that regard. Number three, what we've done is we have taken on the NPA situation in a very serious way. And there are many things we're doing about NPAs. I won't bore you with the details, but it's a multi-dimensional approach that we have taken on NPAs. We're working very closely with the Reserve Bank of India as far as NPAs are concerned, so that we can de-stress some of the balance sheet issues, some of the capitalization issues that the banks are facing. So that's number three. Number four, we have obviously recapitalized the banks. And the recapitalization of the banks is a roadmap that we've laid out. We've said that the banks require 1.8 lakh crores to meet the Basel III norms by 2019. We have provisioned for 70,000 crores, of which 20,000 crores have already gone in I think a very innovative structure across 3 tranches. So we have provided the banks the capital that they need, which is item number 4. Item number 5 is that we are putting in place, and this is also quite historic, friends. Item number 5 is that we've said we are going to put in place a bank boards bureau. And effectively, the power of North Block, or the power of DFS, the Department of Financial Services, in terms of supervision, in terms of strategy setting, in terms of coming up with capital recommendations, is going to be vested in the Bank Board Bureau. And the Bank Board Bureau is going to be appointing directors, selecting MDs, and so on. And so we are actually taking this responsibility from government and delegating it to the Bank Board Bureau. And the Bank Board Bureau is going to be a precursor to actually creating a bank investment company. All of these changes have been laid out in our Indradhanush reform package. Honorable Finance Minister has spoken about it. And of course, we have documented that fully. Now, final point on this. As Honorable Finance Minister has said, we have an opportunity with IDBI Bank, where because it is not nationalized under the Bank Nationalization Act, because it is a company and comes under a different act, we have an opportunity with IDBI Bank to actually transform it in the manner that we have transformed Axis Bank. Axis Bank has been an incredible success. It used to be a part of UTI. It's gone off and become a private sector bank, is flourishing, doing extraordinarily well. And with IDBI, we have an opportunity to do that as well, and to bring it to the same stature and the same success that Axis Bank has achieved. This also is extraordinarily important. And so, ladies and gentlemen, when you look at all the different things we've done for banks, I'm sure you will agree with me that this is truly historic. It is genuinely something that is the most sweeping set of reforms since bank nationalization.
Mr. Sinha, just a couple of quick points on banking, and then we'll move on to another matter. One is, in terms of the NPA issue that you spoke about, what is the glide path that you have for a sustainable NPA number, and by when do you think you will achieve that? What's the government's perspective on that?
Yeah, we actually spend a lot of time looking at the stressed assets, not just the NPA. Stressed assets are at unacceptably high levels. We know exactly why that is the case. As I told you, we have a multi-dimensional plan to work down the stressed assets, including, forcing transparency, the strategic debt restructuring that RBI has, the stressed assets fund that we will likely create through the National Infrastructure Investment Fund, the industry-wide measures that we brought in place. For example, in steel, we've raised safeguard duties. So we're working on industry-wide measures in certain certain industries that are contributing to creating these NPAs. And then finally, because we recognize that in many of these situations we have to work case by case, we are working, the PMO is working, DFS is working, looking individually at some of these NPA situations and seeing how is it that we can work together collaboratively with the promoters, with the banks, with governments, the central government as well as the state government to resolve these NPAs. So we think we'll be able to bring it down. The one point I will make here is that in the previous NDA government, we had a similar situation where we inherited a terrible sort of NPA and stressed assets environment. At that time, NPAs themselves, not stressed assets, NPAs were at 13%. And because we really worked on those, we were able to bring them down to 4 or 5%. Sadly, we lost power. A different government came in, and even though we brought in stressed assets down to 4 or 5%, we have now come back to the situation where we are once again forced to clean up the mess somebody else made.
Okay, in terms of the cleanup, one more quick point. This is the remittances fraud, and over the last few days we've been seeing headlines around that issue. What is your assessment of the situation? Is it worrisome? Is it limited to 1 or 2 cases? Because there have also been reports of many more banks, and is that a worry for us?
We need to be vigilant, and of course we are putting in place and already have done a number of things to ensure that we have very tight risk management and controls for our banks. As you know, the RBI is the supervisor, the regulator. The RBI has put in place a series of controls, suspicious transaction reports, cash transaction reports. So the systems and the controls are in place. But as we have seen around the world, whether it was, the LIBOR rate setting regime here in London, whether it was the financial crimes of various institutions in the United States, is that when you have people within the system that are determined to defraud and are going to shut off the systems, then it becomes very difficult for the controls to work. And in this particular situation, that's exactly what happened. The controls were switched off, the flags were shut down. It's only when the annual audit was done that we were able to flag the fact that there were a suspicious number of forex transactions that went through the bank. And that's the moment we knew about it, we swiftly and immediately took action. So that the reality is that in the financial sector, criminal behavior does exist. And so it is a relentless arms race between the regulators, the supervisors to shut down financial crimes, and sadly, the bad guys. The bad guys are always looking for the loopholes. They're always trying to find ways in which they can exploit systems. And that's why I said that the most important thing in all of this is vigilance, because it's a continuous arms race between the good guys and the bad guys. Now, the good guys always win.
Yeah, I was about to say that. And you're also the person, Mr. Sinha, who has been at the forefront of dealing with another legacy issue. And for the audience, and most of you would understand the severity of this issue, this is the large debt and the dysfunctional situation of the state electricity boards across this country, barring a few. It's a huge issue, and Mr. Sinha here has himself been meeting with states, trying to come up with a solution to fix this problem, because clearly you cannot continuously have bailouts. There have already been 2 major bailouts in the last couple of decades. Mr. Sinha, where does that entire exercise stand today?
It's a difficult problem that we're dealing with because of the legacy situation and the fact that there are very dysfunctional behaviors in terms of power theft and losses that we have to deal with. But we are working towards a structural solution. The Honorable Power Minister, as you know, has held a series of consultations with the states, with the banks, and among senior policymakers to come up with a solution that genuinely will stick. Because as you correctly pointed out, the solutions in the past have frankly only kicked the can down the road. And we've ended up with an even bigger problem at this point. So we have to find a structural solution that will create the right incentives for ensuring that if indeed states want to provide subsidies to electricity tariffs, that it is done in an economically efficient way, and that the states are responsible for those policy decisions, as they should be. As state government, if it wants to subsidize any particular sector, whether it's agriculture or consumers and so on, has the policy space to do that. But then, but even as it has the policy space, it has to think about whether it has the fiscal space. And if it does not have the fiscal space, then it should not be that because of the policy decisions one state makes, that all other states in the union and the union government have to bear that burden. So we have to find a durable and robust mechanism that makes sure that we deal with the moral hazard problem that is associated with shifting those kinds of responsibilities.
Allow me to interrupt you on that, because in some ways a same spirit perhaps drove previous governments also to look at this. But because this is a state-related matter, and this is not the problem comes for the center to deal with, and ultimately it's the state's bad behavior or bad economics. Because of the nature of our governance system, every 5 years government change, and pretty much in most state elections you have had this promise of free power or subsidized power becoming a vote catcher. How hopeful are you, Mr. Sinha, that behaviorally whatever plan is finally put in place by this government would stick on and at least be there for 2 decades, because clearly that is the time that would be required?
I'm very optimistic, and this is based on the facts on the ground. If you look at states like Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh that have very, very well functioning electricity systems, you'll find that all sections of society are getting 24/7 power, that their state electricity boards are running very well, that theft and losses have come down dramatically, and they have been rewarded for that. And that is the very important aspect here. Because I think the Indian voter is very intelligent and wise in these matters. They respect people who can get the job done. They respect people who are able to deliver the public services that they should be delivering. And as we know from our own party's example, is that when our chief ministers have done that in state after state, they have been amply rewarded in the elections themselves. And so I think all right-thinking politicians, political leadership recognize, what actually works and tend to follow that.
I must again point out for the audience that we are in the midst of the Bihar elections, a crucial election. Second round of polling has happened, and at least from a reporter's perspective, I do not know of headlines promising free power. So is it a hallmark of the maturity of that election in terms of the two principal parties who are facing off, or is it the realization that you can't make false promises because those promises will come back and bite you?
Siddharth, the thing is that for us politicians, we don't go away that quickly. So we know that even if we were to lose one election, we have to face another election soon. And so we also recognize how to be able to go back to our voters in a responsible way. So you might promise something, and if you can't deliver, then you have to face the consequences. And so I think we've kind of learned what we need to do.
Okay, I wanted to leave the sort of a small discussion about politics to the very end, but I will sort of bring it forward. Many people in this audience and those who will watch the economy are saying that the Bihar election will be a game changer, and for two reasons. One, in terms of the political capital that is available to the government in parliament and various other forums, and the second is its ability to move ahead with reform. The fear being that if the Bihar election would not pan out as per the current administration's desire, then there would be hurdles that would increase in parliament and elsewhere. Is that an assessment that you share?
We obviously agree that the Bihar election is a very important and profoundly significant election. And Siddharth, since you have asked a political question, I will have to, even in this audience, move into more of a political mode. और मुझे हिंदी में बोलना पड़ेगा
जरूर,
क्योंकि देखिए बिहार का जो चुनाव है, जो बिहार का चुनाव, इसमें एक जो हमारे जो वोटर हैं वो उनको एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण निर्णय लेना पड़ेगा. और वो निर्णय क्या है? निर्णय ये है कि एक तरफ भारतीय जनता पार्टी की विकास की राजनीति है और दूसरी तरफ जो हमारे विपक्ष के नेता हैं उनकी विनाश की राजनीति है. और ये भारत के लिए बहुत एक महत्वपूर्ण निर्णय होगा, क्योंकि अगर बिहार की जनता, और आपको मालूम है कि बिहार जो है बहुत पिछड़ा हुआ एक क्षेत्र है, और अगर बिहार की जनता, जिसको सब लोग कहते हैं कि वो जातिवाद में लगे हुए हैं या उनकी सोच उस प्रकार की है, अगर बिहार की जनता ये निर्णय लेती है कि वो विकास की राजनीति को अपना रही है, तो इस देश के इतिहास में ये एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण एक निर्णय होगा। और इसलिए हम सब लोगों की यही अपेक्षा है, क्योंकि हम लोग इस विकास की राजनीति के मुद्दे को लेकर हम लोग जनता के पास गए हैं। हम सब की अपेक्षा है कि जनता समझदार है, जनता जानती है कि अगर उनको विकास करना है, उनकी जिंदगी में तरक्की होनी है, बिजली होनी है, ये सब अगर होना है, तो सिर्फ एनडीए की सरकार, भारतीय जनता पार्टी की सरकार सिर्फ ये विकास दे सकती है। और इसलिए हम सब लोग विश्वास कर रहे हैं कि जब नतीजे आएंगे 8 नवंबर को, तब बिल्कुल वहां भारतीय जनता पार्टी की सरकार जरूर बनेगी। जातिवाद, भ्रष्टाचार, इस सब को हम पराजित करेंगे और सुशासन बिहार में लौटेगा।
ये आपने एक बहुत अच्छा, एक प्रकार से मैं कहूंगा कि एक स्टंप स्पीच दी है, पर मैं आपसे आग्रह करूंगा कि जो विषय उठ के आ रहा है कि अगर नहीं होता है तो क्या होगा, सरकार की जो पैठ है, सरकार की जो पकड़ है, जो सरकार का एक जिसे कहते हैं नूर है, जलाल है, उस पे इम्पैक्ट पड़ेगा। क्या ये आप मानते हैं कि बिहार के नतीजे केंद्र की फंक्शनिंग और पार्लियामेंट में अड़चन पैदा कर सकते हैं?
सिद्धार्थ जी, देखिए, भारतीय जनता पार्टी की विचारधारा आज की विचारधारा नहीं है, कल की विचारधारा नहीं है। सदियों से हमारी एक विचारधारा रही है, और वो विचारधारा जो है वो देश के हित में हमें काम करना है, हमें विकास के लिए काम करना है, हमारे जनहित में काम करना है। राजनीति में चुनाव आते हैं और जाते हैं, हार आती है जाती है, पर हमारी विचारधारा अटल रहती है। तो चाहे कुछ भी अड़चन हो, हम लोग अपनी विचारधारा पे अग्रसर रहेंगे, हम लोग मेहनत करेंगे, संघर्ष करेंगे, जो हमें करना है हम जनता के सामने जाएंगे, पारदर्शी तरीके से पेश करेंगे और वो हम करके दिखाएंगे। ये आप सही कह रहे हैं कि अगर बिहार में दूसरे दल की जीत होती है तो इससे अड़चन जरूर आएगी, पर क्योंकि हमारी विचारधारा मुझे लगता है जनता ने अपना लिया है। मई 2014 में जो चुनाव हुआ, स्पष्ट नजर आया कि हमारी राजनीति, हमारे सिद्धांत, हमारी विचारधारा ही जनता अपना रही है। मुझे मालूम है कि फिर वो हमें सहयोग देंगे, समर्थन देंगे, और जो भी अड़चन आएंगे उनको हम पार करते हुए आपकी सेवा में हम काम करते रहेंगे।
बहुत बढ़िया। Let's turn back to the final bit of the conversation, and this is about Startup India. We are at the IIT Global Business Forum. IITians have spawned hundreds of companies across the world. Great examples of innovation, great examples of startup, and a lot of people have also expressed sort of dismay at the fact that why does it only happen overseas? But that's not the point that I want to ask you, Mr. Sinha. Your government has put in place this program, or is putting it in place in terms of Startup India. What do you expect finally to come from the Startup India initiative, which the Prime Minister has spoken about several times?
Well, this is one competition that's a great one, because when it comes to Startup India, I think the two institutes that are in the lead, and it's a really good competition, is IIT Bombay and IIT Delhi. So it's a race to the top, folks. We'll see who comes out ahead. You know, there are great companies that have come out of IIT Bombay. There are great companies that have come out of IIT Delhi. They are defining companies, very important companies for India. And it is this spirit of entrepreneurship that we want to encourage, and the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Finance Minister have spoken about it now several times. They've indicated how important it is for us to encourage our entrepreneurial ecosystem, and the reason for it is twofold. First and foremost, we know and recognize that if we have to create millions and millions of jobs, those millions of jobs for our young workforce are not necessarily going to come from our large companies. They're going to come from all of you. They're going to come from the companies all of you create. The Flipkarts create, and the Snapdeals create, and the Olas create, and so on. So we have to really give encouragement to our entrepreneurs for large scalable businesses like I spoke about, but also to the micro enterprises, the thela wala, the dukandar, the cycle repair wala, and that's where the Mudra Yojana is going to be very important, because there we can again create millions of jobs through micro enterprises. So number one is jobs, and we are focused on the entrepreneurial ecosystem and ease of doing business for them, because we want to create these jobs. We have to create these jobs. It's not just a political necessity. it is our moral responsibility. So we have to do that. The second very important reason, and it comes back, Siddharth, to the first question you asked me, which is how fast can India grow? How fast can India grow? It's wonderful that Parag is thinking about all of this, because it is his companies like Cafe Coffee Day and so on